Call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 18 of the Standing Committee on Transport, Infrastructure and Communities. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motions adopted by the committee on Thursday, September 18th, 2025, and on Thursday, December 11th, 2025, the committee is resuming its study of the changing landscape of truck drivers in Canada.
Hybrid format pursuant to the standing orders. I'd like to take a moment to make a few comments for the benefit of our witnesses and our members. First, please wait until I recognize you by name before speaking. For those participating by video conference, please click on the microphone icon to activate your mic, and please mute yourself when you are not speaking. For those on Zoom, at the bottom of your screen, you can select the appropriate channel for interpretation, either floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. A reminder that all comments should be addressed through the chair. For members in the room, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand. For members on Zoom, please use the raise hand function. Clerk and I will manage the speaking order as best we can, and we appreciate your patience and understanding in this regard. I'd now like to welcome our witnesses. Appearing before us today, colleagues from 6S Trinity Transport Limited, Stacey Horlings, the owner, joining us by video conference. Welcome. From J&R Hall Transport Inc., Mr. Jeff Hall, President, welcome to you. And from Ludwig Transport Limited, Mr. Michael Ludwig, Operations Manager. I want to thank all three of you for joining us today. We're now going to proceed with opening remarks, and for that, I will turn the floor over to Ms. Horlings. Ms. Horlings, the floor is yours for your opening remarks. You have 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair and committee members, for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Stacey Horlings, and I am a business owner in the transportation sector. I'm here today because Canada's trucking industry is facing a serious and growing problem. This issue is not theoretical. It's happening right now to real businesses in every province. At its core, the problem is simple. Freight brokers and trucking companies that are brokering freight are not required to carry a surety bond when operating domestically. This gap has allowed anybody, regardless of experience and financial capacity or ethics, to open a freight broker business, hire a trucking company to do the work, then collect money from its customers and disappear without paying the trucking companies who actually move the freight. Trucking companies provide the service, pay for the fuel, insurance, registration, and maintenance, only to be left with an unpaid invoice with no recourse. While legal action is technically available, in practice, it is slow, costly, and ineffective, and in many cases require interprovincial enforcement of judgments, forcing carriers to spend additional time and money transferring court orders from one province to another. In numerous cases, by the time the judgment is secured, the broker has often closed the business, dissolved the corporation, and reappeared under a different company name, rendering the judgment effectively worthless. This creates a system where bad actors face minimal consequences, while legitimate trucking companies absorb the financial loss, legal costs, and painful financial trickle-down effect this has. As an example, other brokers in other industries are required to be licensed and regulated and financially accountable. Take insurance and real estate brokers as an example. They have strict licensing requirements, carry an errors and omissions insurance policy, and in many cases maintain a bond or trust account to protect clients from financial loss due to fraud, misappropriation, and misconduct. These same safeguards are desperately needed in the transportation industry. In the United States, the FMCSA requires any company that brokers freight to carry a surety bond as a condition of operating, which, I might add, has recently been updated to prevent unstable freight brokers from engaging in business that will financially harm the transportation companies. A surety bond does three critical things. First, it establishes credibility. A broker must demonstrate financial responsibility before being allowed to operate. Second, it protects carriers and shippers. If a broker fails to pay, the bond ensures compensation. And third, it enforces accountability. Brokers who fail to comply lose their authority. This is not excessive regulation, but basic financial responsibility, and Canada currently lacks these protections, and bad actors know it. Requiring a surety bond would protect trucking companies at a level the playing field for ethical brokers. More importantly, I believe this will help restore trust across our industry and prevent honest businesses from being unfairly punished. I urge the committee to recommend a framework to be put into place that would require mandatory surety bonds for freight brokers. Trucking companies are not asking for special treatment here. They're asking to be paid for the work already done. As a follow-up, if I'm allowed the time, I would like to share how I believe the safety on the road ties in with financial accountability. Thank you for your time, and I welcome questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Horlings, and I'm sure you'll have an ability to share that information when one of the members asks you a question on that subject. Next, we'll go to Mr. Ludwig, and before we do so, I just want to share with the two witnesses that we have with us in person. I have a yellow card and a red card. A yellow card is to let you know that your time is running out, and a red card means your time has ended. I don't want to cut you off, but to ensure that there's equity of time amongst members, I'm going to be very strict with the time today. So, Mr. Ludwig, I turn the floor over to you. You have 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you. Chair and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear today. My name is Michael Ludwig. I operate a family-run trucking company based in Simcoe, Ontario, in operation since 1961. We operate dry vans, reefers, intermodal containers throughout North America and have survived multiple industry cycles focusing on compliance, safety, and long-term sustainability. I am here today not as a representative of any association, nor as a theorist, but as an operator living with real-world consequences of what is commonly referred to as Driver Inc. I have provided the committee with a written submission outlining evidence, impacts, and recommendations. Today, I want to focus on what this looks like from the operator's seat. In plain language, Driver Inc. is not self-employment. It is the misclassification of employees as independent contractors in order to avoid payroll taxes and basic employment protections. Drivers labeled as independent do not control their rates, customers, or working conditions. Yet they are made responsible for compliance, risk, and long-term financial security, without real entrepreneurial risk or genuine independence. What is occurring is payroll fraud that has become normalized across large portions of the trucking industry. Driver Inc. did not emerge because carriers are inherently malicious. It emerged because trucking operates on extremely thin margins. Enforcement is fragmented, and price, not compliance, has become the dominant factor in shipper decision-making. When enforcement is inconsistent and the market rewards the lowest price, regardless of how it is achieved, non-compliance becomes a competitive advantage. That creates a system where compliant carriers are punished and non-compliant ones are rewarded. The damage from this model falls into four main areas. First, legitimate carriers. Over the last 42 months, one of the worst and longest downturns this industry has experienced, compliant carriers have exited the market or are now seriously considering the adoption of Driver Inc. simply to survive. This pressure is structural, not moral. Second, drivers. Drivers operating under Driver Inc. are often led to believe that they are earning more, but they are trading away CPP, EI, workers' compensation coverage, and long-term financial security. They are one injury, one enforcement action, or one economic downturn away from collapse. Third, government. CPP and EI contributions are lost. Income tax revenue is deferred or never collected. When reassessments finally occur, the money is often gone, usually out of the country. and the companies no longer exist. Fourth, safety. When responsibility is fragmented, accountability weakens. Hours of service violations become easier to hide, maintenance is deferred, equipment standards slip. When everyone is labeled independent, it becomes unclear who is ultimately responsible for safety outcomes on Canadian roads. Enforcement has not kept pace with the scale of the problem. CRA action is largely reactive and often occurs after the damage has been done. The most troubling part of this reality is that I am sitting here today before lawmakers describing a system that can push otherwise compliant carriers toward illegality simply to survive. More guidance documents or voluntary compliance initiatives will not solve this issue. Drivers are not in a position to challenge the structure they are placed in, and carriers will not police themselves. Compliant operators cannot survive in a system where enforcement is optional. What would make a difference is predictable, early, and coordinated enforcement. Joint action between CRA, labor authorities, and transportation regulators, real consequences for deliberate misclassification, and accountability that reaches those who knowingly benefit from non-compliant pricing. This is not about eliminating legitimate owner-operators. Genuine independent contractors exist and should continue to exist. This is about ensuring that independence is real and not fictional. Driver Inc. is no longer a loophole at the margins of the industry. It is rapidly becoming the dominant operating model. If nothing changes, Canada risks losing its compliant trucking industry entirely. And once that capacity is gone, it will not be easy to rebuild. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Just on time. Thank you very much, Mr. Ludwig. Next, we'll go to Mr. Hall. Mr. Hall, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Allow me to say thanks for your efforts to date on the topic of changing landscape of truck drivers in Canada. It's my genuine hope that we can make a difference and change the direction of an industry that has supported my family for 4 generations, hopefully for the 5th. I do have time. The 5th are only top age at 11. A quick history of J&R Hall. 270 staff members from Ontario to British Columbia. We haul expedited high-value products for about 500 customers. We operate 110 trucks, have 6 terminals across Canada. We employ staff from each province in Western Canada. My grandfather began in '49. Along the years, there's been a few name changes from John T. Hall to Drumbo to Airline, and lastly, since 1987, J&R Hall, all owned by my family. Our industry and my family appreciate the commitment of the federal government involving CRA, ESDC, and to control the lawlessness of trucking. However, I think we've got a long way to go. Even today, 6 out of 10 drivers who apply at our place want to be illegitimate contractors known as Driver Inc. Simply put, there's not enough being done, and the future of family business is in jeopardy. Our industry has unfortunately attracted some of the lowest caliber participants in recent years. The lack of ethics and respect for law and order is jeopardizing my family business that took decades of care, investment, and credibility to build. We are competing with individuals who have stolen 5 trucks out of my yard in 2025 alone. We operate in rural Ontario on my grandfather's farm, not in a major urban area. We've since recovered 4. Most of these have had our decals removed, the VIN numbers removed, and have gone to the downside. I would like to stress that we work to recover our vehicles with our own resources, as our police don't have interest in investigating these crimes, nor are there consequences for the individuals that stole my trucks. These trucks, which have my family name on them, are undoubtedly going to be used for illegal purposes. These carriers are nefarious fleets, operate the trucks unsafely, illegally, and put one of us at risk every day. Just check out the trucks on the road today with the green hoods, the white cabs, the yellow doors, and you'll see the Brand B carriers. As a child, I remember very well driving with my father, bad weather, pulling behind a truck will be safe. Today, nobody wants to be near a truck, and frankly, I don't blame them. On this note, I'd like to also address safety. Less than 0.5% of fleets today have an excellent CVOR safety rating. I'm proud to say that we do. Many of the Brand B fleets we compete with do not share our vision of safety, yet all of us and our families share the road with them. Many are unaudited because they don't have an office or they don't have employees. They have Driver Inc., they have contractors. There's no proof of documented companies. Imagine if they were constantly visited by ESDC, Transport Canada, like we have been, to the tune of 5 audits this year. Likewise, inspection scales are not open 24/7 throughout our country and can be easily avoided by these carriers who operate dangerously. Our trucks cross the scales. We have bypass systems in our trucks to get around the scale or to go past the scales, especially in British Columbia, due to our consistent safety record and performance. We also allow these unscrupulous fleets to utilize facility insurance or government insurance like it's no big deal. The reason they do this is because they are too great a risk for normal insurance. Well, if the shoe fits, put it on. Don't let them be in business. Why do our provincial governments invest in bad business with my tax dollars? Please allow me to comment on how we can ensure and enhance truck safety and address the lack of places for drivers to stop and rest in Canada, specifically Ontario. As you may or may not know, hours of service for drivers determines route planning and trip planning. In the U.S., we have rest stops, heated washrooms, cleaned daily at a minimum, vending machines providing drinks and snacks for drivers. In fact, the U.S. government is actively planning to expand and increase their investment in rest stops. Today in Northern Ontario, our drivers have very little to nothing compared to these amenities. We're constantly asked to not park in service centers because they don't have room. We're provided portable washrooms that don't get cleaned at some scales. Our snowplow turnouts in Northern Ontario are so disgustingly dirty, you don't even want to drive into them, and they're rarely cleaned or policed. We desperately need rest stops with parking, at least services, in Northern Ontario. We also need snow removal equipment in places like Batchewana Bay. The accidents are so often caused by poorly trained drivers or untrained drivers, but often winter maintenance is virtually non-existent. The stretch of road from Sault Ste. Marie to White River along the east end of Lake Superior is the worst section of road in the province due to weather and wildlife. We have installed moose bumpers on our trucks to protect us. Wouldn't it be a novel idea for the province to try and protect every traveler in that section as well as the wildlife?
Mr. Hall, I'm just going to have to ask you to wrap up if that's okay, if you have any final points. And I want to just let you know as well, you could submit this as a written submission so we can include it in the testimony.
In closing, I would like to say thank you again for the invitation to speak. Thank you for the time spent to consider the needs of the industry and what the fifth generation of my family will need to succeed in the transportation industry. If I can ever be of assistance moving forward, I'm all in. Please, let's stop talking about these problems. Let's get something done with them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hall. We'll go right into our line of questioning, and for that, we'll turn the floor over to Mr. Cody. Mr. Cody, the floor is yours. You have...
Cody?
Oh, Miss Cody, the very beautiful Miss Cody. The floor is yours. You have 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Through you, I want to thank all the witnesses for coming out today. It's a really important issue to be brought here to this committee. My first question I'm going to ask Mr. Hall. Cambridge is a hub of the trucking sector, so I've heard from many people who tell me they feel uneasy when they're driving on the road with transport trucks, and more so with all the increased accidents, unsafe driving that is witnessed. Recently, many are calling our northern roads a death trap. From your experience, how would you assess the overall safety standards in the trucking sector, both in terms of driver training and truck maintenance? And what concerns do you see on the road today? And would a national strategy help resolve the issues?
Recently, you've seen driver schools put out of business for unfit practices. That has contributed towards the poor quality of the drivers that are on the road. I mentioned the Northern Ontario part of it. Poor road conditions contribute, but some of these drivers shouldn't be allowed to go further north than Barrie without training. Drivers need to be trained. I would recommend personally to have a graduated license system. Today, our drivers can go 3-month program, and here's your B train loaded with 150,000 pounds of gasoline and take it to Vancouver. They don't have training for that, so they definitely need more training.
Right.
A national program would help, and I'd love to be a part of trying to arrange it.
You also noted that a lack of adequate rest areas on the highways across Canada has real labor force impacts, and women drivers often face added challenges when safe facilities aren't available. Given the federal role in extra-provincial trucking and national transportation corridors, can you expand on how the shortage of safe rest area affects drivers and what federal measures could help address it?
So it's gotten worse since the hours of service laws changed a few years back, where drivers try to maximize everything. They don't do split sleeper berths, so if they don't plan their trips appropriately, or if they get delayed due to accidents, traffic, weather, they end up stopping in places that don't have services. I believe we have added 2 rest areas in Northern Ontario. One is Batchewana Bay, one is right at the Manitoba border. I believe the one at Batchewana Bay has parking for 6 trucks. Well, I can tell you last week the road was closed at Batchewana Bay for 39 hours. 6 trucks can park there. 6 trucks can go to the washroom there. The other, I'm going to guess, 1,000 can't.
Okay.
So it's huge.
My next question is for Mr. Ludwig. Thank you for coming today. You have operated a family-run trucking company in Simcoe for decades, moving freight through local roads, border routes, and regional supply chains that communities in southwestern Ontario rely on every day. In your testimony, you underline how Driver Inc. isn't just a labor issue, but a safety governance failure. From what you see on the ground in and around Simcoe, what risk does this enforcement gap pose to public safety, accountability, and standards like hours of service and vehicle maintenance? And do you believe the federal government has treated those risks with the same seriousness as other transportation safety issues?
The short answer is no. In our area, we don't see a lot of that problem, but we travel to areas where we do see that as being an issue. The drivers that aren't trained properly, that are skirting the law, they're simply not safe. They don't worry about what their equipment is like. They go around scales. They go to places where they can't get caught. One of our big lanes is between the Fort Erie border and CP Rail in Vaughan. Lots of times my guys are running up and down the QEW doing their thing, doing what they're supposed to do. We'll see guys traveling all the way out as far as Brantford, to bypass scales and get around and go up Highway 6 and cut back into Toronto the back way because the equipment is just simply not safe. The rest of your question, I'm sorry?
Well, I can go on about insurance costs are going up. And I'm wondering if you think insurance costs are increasing from the crime or the drivers or businesses that are not properly insured.
My insurance costs are not going up, but because I run a very safe company. Insurance costs in general, I think, are probably going up because of a lack of safe drivers, more exposure to lawsuits within the marketplace. It's only a matter of time before somebody gets one that's $1 billion. It's already happened in Florida. It's only a matter of time before it comes here.
Okay, and can I go back to Mr. Hall? We're hearing more and more about mental health being a real challenge across the country, and truckers are no exception. Long hours, isolation, stress, and time away from family can take a real toll. With most trucks now monitored through federally mandated electronic logging and where many drivers are paid by the mile, do you feel this federally regulated structure creates pressure on drivers or encourages unnecessary risk as they try to maximize their mileage within the allowable driving time?
I feel the hours of service that is created now is fair to drivers. I feel the structure of it creates some pressure on drivers. I'll give an example of that. The next town I can stop in Northern Ontario is Thunder Bay, and right now I'm in Marathon. It's a 3-hour drive, and an hour in there's an accident that shuts the road down, the 2-lane road, I will add, that shuts the road down for 2 hours. There is nowhere else for drivers to stop. So the hours of service contributes to mental health on one side. It also, the structure helps.
Thank you very much, Ms. Cody, and thank you very much, Mr. Hall. Next, we'll go to Mr. Greaves. Mr. Greaves, the floor is yours. You have 6 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. I'd like to start with Mr. Hall. Thank you for your testimony, sir. I have driven those highways in Northern Ontario, not in a big truck, but I do have some firsthand understanding of the challenges you described. You mentioned that your business operates in Ontario West all the way to BC, so your drivers will have experience of the different kinds of enforcement and inspections in those different Western provinces and Ontario itself. I'm wondering if you could just speak to what kind of differences your business and your drivers have had, experiences your business and drivers have had of enforcement in the different provinces. Are there some that are clearly more efficient, more proactive, safer, or not? Thank you.
I would say the roads contribute to safety a little more in Western Canada, but from a point of view of safety and enforcement, I can drive from southwestern Ontario to the Ontario-Manitoba border before I cross a scale that's open 9 times out of 10. There is a scale at the Manitoba border at West Hawk that hardly ever closes. I can then go from there to Golden, British Columbia, and 9 of 10 of those scales are not open. Golden, British Columbia is another one that is often open. But it's not uncommon to drive from Ontario to the West Coast and not cross more than 1 or 2 scales that are open.
Okay. Wow. Okay. Thank you. One specific thing that you shared during your opening statement is you said that 6 out of 10 applicants to work for your company are essentially looking to be employed as independent contractors under the Driver Inc. model. That's an interesting observation. It's a little different than we've heard at this committee from other witnesses who've spoken more about unscrupulous companies employing drivers under the Driver Inc. model as a way of avoiding payroll taxes. Could you elaborate on that, please? What's happening there with these individuals who want to be employed in this way?
I think there's been a little bit of noise made, and that's created a bit of a stir amongst, as I referred to, the Brand B carriers. So some of them are reaching out. I'm going to say half of the drivers that apply at our place initially and ask that question only phone in. And as soon as they get the answer, it's a click, dial tone, and they're gone. We do have some walk-ins. As I mentioned, we're in rural Ontario, so we're not real popular for people walking in without a plan in mind. But 6 out of 10 is what my safety department gave me as today's numbers. So it's kind of scary. And we've never dabbled in that industry, that part of the industry. So why we are getting and attracting so many, I think, is only because of the noise that ESDC and others, WSIB, are making around the industry.
So would it be fair to say then that it perhaps is more recently, as there's been more public attention paid to the Driver Inc. model, that you're seeing individual applicants perhaps responding to that attention and seeking to be employed in that way?
I would see more recently, yes, but I would also say a growing number because of the benefits of it, or as they refer to the benefits of it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, fine. Thank you. Mr. Ludwig, thank you for being here with us this afternoon. Previous witnesses to this committee have shared testimony that they have tried but not had a lot of success in meeting with the Provincial Ministry of Transportation in Ontario on issues related to enforcement and road safety. I'm wondering if you could speak to your firm's experience of trying to engage with MTO in Ontario to express the concerns that you've raised about safety and enforcement.
It's rather interesting. Recently, we were a CVOR excellent carrier. We're now off by 1.3% and have lost our excellent carrier status. When we were excellent, because we run a lot in the QEW corridor, we were hunted relentlessly by scales, by law enforcement officers, scales at what's the place? Vineland. And Oakville, constantly trying to find something wrong with our trucks. And inevitably, if they couldn't find them, you would get what was be called chafing airlines, which is an indefensible indefensible action, but it goes against your CVOR record. Once our record dropped us from excellent to satisfactory, the number of inspections that we have endured has decreased to almost zero. We went from 40 to 60 a month down to 0 to 10 a month. That's the way MTO, I guess, likes to treat their better carriers. You're hunted relentlessly until you fail. In speaking with other ministry people, I have had successes in speaking with people in London on particular issues. I have had no successes at all in speaking with MTO people in Hamilton on other issues. It's kind of a crapshoot.
Thank you very much, Mr. Greaves, and thank you, Mr. Ludwig. Prochainement, nous avons Mr. Barcelot-Duval.
I will now give the floor to Mr. Barcelot-Duval. You have 5 minutes. Thank you to the witnesses for being with us today. It's interesting to say that I'm pleased to speak to you. It's unfortunate to see that the situation that I'm hearing about from those who are in the industry in Quebec, their perspective is very, very similar to yours. Some witnesses have come to committee to say that things were going well, that the Driver Inc. model was great, but I'm happy to hear that that's not the case and to have a different perspective. I would like to hear about your experience. Do you believe that the increase in that Driver Inc. phenomenon is linked to the number of accidents on the road? And if so, what is the link to be made between the two? I'll start with Mr. Ludwig and perhaps Mr. Hall afterwards.
Does Driver Inc. lead to safety problems is what I get that you're asking. Yes, there is no question that it leads to safety problems. So a Driver Inc. driver could come and drive for me, and I would know that he has put in his 14-hour shift. And then he could drive over to Jeff's place and drive for him and put in another 14 hours. And nobody knows that this man has just worked for 28 hours straight with no sleep. Clearly, that's a problem out there on the streets. When Driver Inc. drivers are, what's the best way to, they're made responsible for equipment that they don't own. So if that driver's in an accident, where does the police or the MTO or SAAQ or whoever, where do they go to find the maintenance records, the hours of service records, the qualification records, everything that we as legitimate carriers, when you ask for, I can have to you in 10 minutes. You know, they're all scanned, all the maintenance, everything. You can't do that with a Driver Inc. fleet because that information is simply not readily available. And that puts, with these people, they know that, and so they get away with just driving junk and not caring about who they run into, who they run over.
Il y a des gens qui nous ont dit au comité que...
Some have told us that there are people who no longer want to drive. Former drivers say that they're leaving the industry because it's no longer safe. Is that something that you've heard from drivers who are leaving because of the high number of incompetent drivers and Driver Inc. drivers? Perhaps Mr. Hall and then Mr. Ludwig?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't get that too much with my drivers because we drive in a different area. But I can imagine Jeff's drivers who have to drive up 11 and 17 on the Trans-Canada going that way. It's like murderer's row. It's a terrible thing to say. But the chances of a driver getting in an accident up there probably 10 times than what they are here, maybe more. It's inevitable that you're going to get in one. I would think if you drove 5 years up there, you would have at least one. And not being your fault, someone would run into you. And typically it's another truck. When another truck ranging from anywhere from 80,000 to 140,000 pounds runs into you at 100 or 105 kilometers an hour, one can imagine that there's not going to be too many survivors. Do you want to be one of those statistics? No, not me, not a lot of drivers. I can understand why they want to get out.
Monsieur Hall, voulez-vous commenter?
Mr. Hall, would you like to comment?
Yes, absolutely. One leads to the next. The driver inc. is tax evasion. The driver inc. then leads to equipment maintenance evasion. It leads to hauling illegal loads, not employing, but hiring illegal people. It's all blended in together. Have we lost drivers that are afraid to go to, I'll use Northern Ontario specifically because it's near and dear to me? Absolutely we have. The caliber of driver has decreased exponentially across the country. It's exaggerated in Northern Ontario, specifically in the area that I mentioned to you along the east end of Lake Superior. You've got wildlife to contend with, you've got weather, you've got hills, and inexperienced drivers and poorly maintained roads. So one definitely blends into the other one.
Quelle est la proportion que vous estimeriez?
What would be the proportion of those using Driver Inc. in the industry? Is it 5%, 10, 50%? Do you have an idea?
Une approximation?
Could you give us an estimate?
Of an idea of
Percentage?
Yeah.
the percentage of drivers that are in that area that are Driver Inc. Quite a few. There was at one time companies that would take the mileage from a mileage program that said it was X number of miles from Toronto to Vancouver, and it should take 53.4 hours to drive that route. So they would pay the minimum wage for the number of hours. Well,
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Ludwig. Merci, Mr. Barcel-Duval. Next, we'll go to Mr. Motz. Mr. Motz, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you, witnesses. Stacey, nice to see you. I'm going to keep you busy for the next 5 minutes. Great to have you as a witness, and you bring a different issue to this whole trucking conversation than Drivers Inc. And I was intrigued to hear about the whole idea behind the bonding and the failure to have security bonds. So you touched on it before you relinquished your time. In your view, what's the impact of having bonded carriers who aren't bonded or bonding brokers who aren't secured, freight brokers on road safety, on the manufacturers, carriers, and market fairness?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And if I could just share with you a simple scenario here. So Bob one day was sitting in his basement and was talking to a friend, Scott. And Scott works at a manufacturing plant and expressed his struggle with trying to find a truck for a shipment leaving his facility. Well, wouldn't you know it, Bob is now selling loads to trucking companies that his buddy Scott gave him. Bob just opened up his computer and called himself a freight broker. Bob puts the load on the load board. He's not trained, he's not experienced in finding qualified carriers. The only thing Bob really cares about is how much money he makes at the end of the day. So Bob sells the load to ABC Trucking Company for $800. ABC Trucking needs this load to get the driver back home. Bob invoices his buddy for $2,500, and Bob just made $1,700 with no concern for who he entrusted that load with or who's actually behind the wheel. And this tends to relate to the Driving Inc. We need to know who's behind the wheel. So first, Bob's also irresponsible, and he takes out his friends and spends all the money, even the $800 to pay ABC Trucking. Now that's like an exact scenario of, what it would look like as a broker some brokers, I should add. So there's 3 issues here. And number 1 is ABC didn't get paid. The financial pressures forces carriers to cut corners and hire underqualified drivers and delay critical repairs and maintenance. And secondly, Bob can operate without any training, industry knowledge, and he has no financial risk of his own. So he doesn't employ drivers, yet he controls the decisions that directly impact who's on the road. So, and then the last thing is the broker boards. They're not required to have any oversight. So the load boards, they collect $800 a month from ABC Trucking Company, and they collect $800 from Bob. So as long as both parties continue to pay, the system functions financially. So
Right. So what you're saying, and you said it briefly, is I mean, the scam on the freight brokers not having security goes hand in hand with Drivers Inc. and the challenges
Yes.
that we have with that unscrupulous drivers and companies that follow along there. Now, it's probably impossible to try and put an economic figure behind this. You talked about road safety, and the other gentleman from Ludwig and Hall certainly covered some of that. So in my limited time, I mean, I'm solutions orientated. So you have this problem with Drivers Inc. You have this problem with the brokers. What's the solution? How does the government properly introduce legislation, regulations to make this work?
15-second response, please.
So when responsibility is clearly defined and enforced at each level of the financial transaction in the trucking industry, safety stops being an afterthought and it starts becoming the foundation of the system.
Thank you very much, Ms. Horlings, and thank you very much, Mr. Motz. Next, we'll go to Ms. Wien. Ms. Wien, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to thank the witnesses for being here today and sharing some perspectives that we certainly need in this conversation around making sure that our roads continue to be safe. One of the pieces that we know obviously that the enforcement of safety, like we set the standards federally, but at the enforcement is at the provincial side. And Mr. Hall, you talked a little bit about your experience in the interprovincial context. Given that, I'm curious if you could talk about some of the best practices you are seeing in provinces where we're doing this well, and so that we can think about how we recommend more of this best practice across the country. So jurisdictions that are doing that roadside enforcement in an approach that you think is really effective.
To me, it's all about opening the scales. So West Hawk, which is the Manitoba-Ontario border, that scale hardly ever closes. We don't have problems of poorly maintained roads, poorly operated trucks. Very often, they get into Winnipeg, but when you go west out of Winnipeg, it kind of ends. So open up the scales. The province has invested millions of dollars into a few new scales. There's one just outside of Thunder Bay right now that has visibility of traffic going both ways for probably 2 miles. And it's open, I'm going to say 8 hours a day, maybe 4 days a week. Well, there's a truck stop 2 miles away from it. So if I'm this driver that knows he can't pass the safety, knows he's out of hours, he sits there in the truck stop at Pass Lake and waits for the lights to stop flashing. Then he carries on. It's so easy for these guys to operate. If the scales were open 24/7, and not just Ontario, every province, we would all be safer. And I don't just mean as truckers, I mean everybody would be safer.
I'm curious if the other witnesses have anything to add on that, or good practices, considerations that we want to make sure that we might be able to share back to other levels of government or provinces that we do this work with.
more audits, definitely more audits. If I'm just going to use MTO as an example, loosen the purse strings a little bit, hire more inspectors, train inspectors better, hire more auditors, get out there, get into the trucking industry everywhere and get things done. Just as a quick example, CP Rail up at Vaughan, you would be hard pressed to find an MTO officer anywhere near there. Just have a look at the equipment that runs in and out of there. And that is Fine City all day long if law enforcement were to show up and do their job.
Thank you very much. Stacey, did you have anything to add to that?
I just have to add, Chair, that it starts from the top up, from shippers, receivers, knowing who's coming in their door, being accountable, trucking company owners and freight brokers, they all need to not just be worried about the bottom dollar and pay for good service and know that they're getting a quality driver that comes through their shipping and receiving.
Thanks. I also want to ask a little bit about training. I know that's not a role that we play here, but if we think about what you'd like to see as national standards, more of that work, is there anything else you'd like to suggest that we consider as we continue this?
Who in particular, me?
Yes.
MELT training is 103.5 hours. The people that I put through training, I add in an additional 30. That's just for basic training before they get their license. I pay for that myself. And then I bring people in and they run with one of my drivers who is a trainer himself, 4 to 6 weeks until my trainer is comfortable with that person being able to do the job properly. If that potential driver does not have it by that period of time, and we think they have the potential, we'll send them back to school. If we really don't think that this is the lifestyle for them, then we'll suggest that a change of career may be in order. So that's,
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Ludwig, and thank you, Ms. Wien. Prochainement, nous avons Mr. Barcelou-Duval.
Monsieur Barcelou-Duval, you have 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Chair. You both brought up challenges and the fact that this is a terrible phenomenon that has horrible impacts on safety. Is this also something that has an impact on your business numbers? And if nothing is done, do you believe that you will be able to pass on your businesses to a future generation? How long do you think you will last? Mr. Hall?
What is happening and the effect on our business is from the dollar point of view. So the less scrupulous carriers are driving rates down. They'll go into our best customers and convince them that they can do this for less. Our best customers put pressure on us. They don't necessarily walk, but they put pressure on us and say, hey, XYZ's doing this for $500 less, so okay, I'll do it for $250 less. At the end of the day, we need our customers to be our business partners. We need to be profitable. Profit in the trucking industry seems to be a bad word. And customers will pay for it if there aren't people out there cutting corners and offering to do it for less.
Monsieur Ludwig, avez-vous quelque chose à ajouter?
Do you have anything to add, Mr. Ludwig?
Our business probably will not be here by the end of 2027 if the problem of Driver Inc. and road safety is not solved. That's just the simple economic numbers. We burned our war chest through this past, through this past economic downturn. The unreasonable pressure from Driver Inc. fleets is pretty much unbearable. I just don't see a fiscal way forward beyond this for too much longer. There's no point in throwing big money at that.
À ce moment-là, comment vous expliquez que
Both of you are carriers who are always have to do inspections, and yet less work is being done to inspect these drivers from Driver Inc. Do you believe that the federal approach is the right one? 15 seconds.
I think increased federal guidelines is the right way to go, and let the provinces follow, but hold the provinces accountable to meet the federal standard.
Merci, Mr. Ludwig. Thank you very much. Merci, Mr. Barclay-Duval. Next, we'll go to Mr. Lawrence. Mr. Lawrence, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you. And I'll start with you, Ms. Orlings. And I'll actually carry on from my colleagues' questions. And so you have said that the lack of carriers having a necessity to have a bond or insurance is inhibiting the ability to have safe vehicles. In general, my principle with respect to federalism is national where necessary, provincial where possible. I very much think that in this case it is that we do need national involvement, national data, national licensing, and perhaps national insurance there. Would you agree with those comments? And if so, please tell me why.
Yes, I do agree with those comments. Even in terms of a surety bond and coordinating with the United States FMCSA, if a broker decides to not pay a trucking company in the U.S., and I try and go after their bond and collect, sometimes I will get that hard no because it delivered on the Canadian side or it picked up on the Canadian side. And so, from a national standpoint, absolutely, there needs to be.
Ms. Orleans, could I just pick up on what you just said there? So if you were making a claim, it would be easier to collect from a U.S. carrier than it would be from a Canadian carrier? Or did I misunderstand?
So technically, yes, it would be easier because there's nothing in place in Canada that protects to collect money. With the U.S., at least there's a surety bond that allows us to try and collect.
Thank you very much for that. That's some very helpful testimony. At this point, Mr. Hall and Mr. Ludwig, I'll turn to you. Mr. Ludwig, thank you for your very candid conversation. It can't be easy to say the words that you just said. One of my suspicions is that the Drivers Inc. is an issue. Don't get me wrong, but it's also a symptom that it's not just the missing out on CPP and other that are actually doing it. I believe that there's also a greater association with things like not doing proper training, not doing proper vehicle maintenance. Would either of you agree with that?
You, sir, are absolutely correct.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. The other thing is, Mr. Ludwig, with your testimony, it really brought it home to me that as much as these conversations are necessary, it's really now is the time for action, and that if the federal government doesn't take action within a reasonable time, irreparable harm will be done to your very important industry. Would you also agree with that, and maybe expand on some of the potential impacts?
Yes, absolutely. The choice I face today, as we're moving forward, and I've said probably the end of 2027, if we do nothing, is I have to decide, is my company going to continue? And if it is, and you don't do anything, then I have to go with the Driver Inc. model. Otherwise, I'm done. I just can't make enough money to stay alive.
Mr. Hall, would you like to comment on that?
Wages are probably the highest percentage of our costs, seconded by fuel. We have about a 30% uptick in accessorial costs with our wages. If we can eliminate that and join the Driver Inc. field, and then if we can eliminate the effort that we put into repairs and maintenance in our equipment, then we can lower prices. but we're not doing anybody any favors. There will be no future for family businesses in trucking.
And would you also agree with Mr. or Ms. Orlings that at least there's a need out there for national information? And to me, the lack of national information, the lack of enforcement is one of the things that is driving a race to the bottom. Would you agree with that as well?
I would as well.
Thank you. That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lawrence. And finally, for this round of questioning, we'll turn the floor over to Mr. Kellaway, who's joining us online. Mr. Kellaway, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and hello to the witnesses. And really important testimony today. That goes without saying. Just over my right shoulder, I don't know if you can see it, but there's a miner's hat, there's a miner's lantern, and my dad was in charge of mine rescue for the Cape Breton mines for years. And I used to pal around with him quite a lot, and when I was a young man, and the amount of effort that went into the training and the follow-up training and the auditing in terms of mine rescue, for those that don't know, the men that would go down in terms of a crisis or recovery or to assist someone in some way. It was rigorous training, and it wasn't one-off, and it was consistently followed up with auditing. A couple of things come to mind, and MP Lawrence kind of touched upon it. You know, so far in the testimony, from a variety of sources, you know, we're hearing the lack of training, the lack of follow-up training, the lack of enforcement, the lack of accountability because of the lack of enforcement and training. So I want to maybe start with Mr. Hall, and then go to Mr. Ludwig, and then go to Ms. Horlings for a second here. And looking at going forward on recommendations, I want to make sure we get the right terminology from you in terms of the recommendations. What I'm hearing is more investment in enforcement, training, accountability, more audits, more inspections. Not the sole cure, but part of the process in terms of trying to make things better here. I'm also hearing too, and not just in this testimony, a national database, and what I'm hearing, and I want to maybe ask you this question, is more federal involvement in terms of the management of training and the follow-up of training, because it is a joint enterprise. The province does certain things, we do certain things. So maybe we could start there, Mr. Hall, because I do want to see the next generation of Halls on the road. And Mr. Ludwig, I don't want to see your business go out of business. And Ms. Horlings, I want to see what you do, you keep doing. So Mr. Hall, maybe to you, just in terms of, we could start with training and enforcement and recommendations there. And just on the national database and more federal involvement in what is traditional provincial territory.
Federal involvement is mandatory because our drivers, to go into training, our drivers travel in different jurisdictions. So if we have graduated licensing, somebody can drive in Saskatchewan between Regina and Saskatoon, maybe with less experience than a guy that's going to go west out of Calgary at midnight with a loaded set of B trains full of fuel. The training needs to be graduated for drivers. There needs to be accountability from safety and compliance point of view. It needs to be set up federally, but you also need all the provinces to buy into it. Some of the provinces get a little lax. Some of them are a little more interested, depending where you're going. So you do have to push them all, but change is mandatory. Change has to happen, or businesses like ours will not be here, and roads are just going to get worse and worse and worse.
Okay. Mr. Ludwig?
You asked for solutions.
Yep. 100%.
As far as training and stuff, I agree with Jeff. Two really simple solutions that this body of people can probably manage in a few hours, if not a few weeks. T4As for everyone, from the shipper on down. Let's track the money. Everybody's watched a crime show, and that's the overwhelming modus operandi there is follow the money. So follow the money takes you everywhere that you need to go. The other thing that needs to be done is stop providing facility insurance to commercial entities, to commercial for-profit entities. All you're doing is insuring bad people. Like there's it's my tax dollars that are going to pay when those big judgments come into play. If the best minds in risk analysis won't insure these people, why in Lord's name would the government? Like the best risk assessors don't work for the government. They work for private industry, and they won't touch these people. Why do you?
MP Lawrence mentioned something, and I'm just interested in your take, all of you actually, we'll go next to Ms. Horlings. Drivers Inc. is obviously a focus of this study. It's an aspect of it, and a huge driver. But are the issues, even deeper than Drivers Inc.? And I just want to kind of confirm that, just because when we're trying to establish what the priorities are and the problems are, obviously we're focused on Drivers Inc. But things like I heard today with respect to the situation of the truck stops, the roadways, the lack of scales, actually play a fundamental role in safety. So is it a problem, granted, from your perspective, but there seems to be a lot of deeper issues here, right?
Sorry, you wanted me to start at this one?
Sure.
We only have time for you, Ms. Horling, so I'll turn it over to you for 20 seconds, please.
Okay.
There is so many deep issues within the trucking industry that need to be addressed, including what Mr. Lundwick said in terms of insurance companies. Everything needs, wherever there's a financial transaction that takes place within the industry, it needs to be reviewed. Simple as that.
Thank you, Ms. Horlings.
Thank you, Ms. Lawrence. Ms. Horlings, thank you very much, Mr. Kellaway. On behalf of the entire committee, I want to thank our three witnesses for being here today, sharing their experiences as owners and operators of trucking companies across the country. It's very helpful for our study, or very helpful for our members. We're going to suspend for a couple of minutes, colleagues, as we transition to the next round of witnesses. I want to wish our witnesses for today a safe voyage home for those of you who are leaving Ottawa. This meeting is suspended.
Colleagues, I would now like to welcome our next witnesses from the Association des professionnels du dépannage du Québec. We have Régent Breton.
Stahl, Vice President. And from Carmet Transportation Solutions Limited, we have Vince Tarantini, President. Thanks to all of you for appearing before us today. We'll begin with our opening remarks. Et avec ça, je vous passe la parole, Monsieur Breton.
I give you the floor, Mr. Breton. You have 5 minutes. Thank you, committee members, for inviting us today. The Association des professionnels du dépannage represents 385 companies involved in roadside assistance industry throughout Quebec. These companies respond to emergency calls 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, including for police forces such as the SQ through a roadside assistance service agreement, as well as for officers from the Contrôle routier du Québec. We also participate in several roundtable discussions, including with the Ministry of Transport and the Société d'assurance automobile du Québec. We would like to raise your awareness today regarding the emergence of Driver Inc. and its impact. We will spare you all the other information that has already been submitted to the committee, which has been carefully detailed by other associations related to the trucking industry in Quebec, including the Canadian Trucking Industry and other trucking associations in Canada. For us, here are the issues that we are currently facing. Several tractor-trailers linked to Driver Inc. travel on public roads, and when they encounter any difficulty, such as a collision, they're stuck, or they break down, the police, through an agreement, require and force towing companies to intervene. Furthermore, in the event of a mechanical defect, which is something that happens daily, a road agent may impound a heavy vehicle and require it to be stored in an impound lot. However, sometimes due to non-payment or abandonment of a vehicle that has not been claimed by these Driver Inc. drivers, impound lot operators are faced with trucks that are taking up storage space. And that's not to mention environmental management linked to the Environment Quality Act. Apart from the fact that few heavy vehicles linked to Driver Inc. that may be insured by chance, for which we sometimes receive financial compensation, most of these heavy-duty vehicles in storage are not claimed. And if we sometimes dare to accept payment using a credit card, it is often canceled a few hours later by the Driver Inc. person saying that it was defrauded. Some towing companies are now being forced to assume the costs of non-payment for services rendered at the request of law enforcement officers. And for your information, the total amount is $3.8 million for the last 2 years. We need to look for robust solutions in a collaborative way and have consultation between various stakeholders. We recommend, given our obligation to respond to requests from authorities to clear the road network, and among the various measures to be implemented, the Association des professionnels du dépannage du Québec and the entire roadside assistance industry in Canada are calling for a payment guarantee mechanism for towing companies. We also believe that shippers who profit financially from Driver Inc. need to be included in the chain of administrative and operational responsibility, because by turning a blind eye, they are complicit in this national scam. Law enforcement officials must obtain and feel the leadership of all elected officials regardless of their political allegiances. And they need to legislate, not only in terms of the province's highway safety code, but also in terms of the criminal and penal codes. Furthermore, there needs to be a mechanism to ensure that these heavy vehicles are insured. With all due respect, the roadside assistance industry trusts the House of Commons and this committee to take note of this national scourge, which will greatly affect the national economy if nothing is done. Respectfully, thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Tarantini. Mr. Tarantini, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes, sir.
Chair and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear. I am an Ontario-based carrier, and my company has operated in this industry for over 40 years with a strong focus on safety and compliance. I'm here because what is happening in the trucking industry is no longer just a business problem. It has become a public safety issue and a fair competition issue. This crisis has outgrown provincial tools alone and now requires increased federal collaboration. I will highlight several key issues I am concerned about. First, driver licensing and training. From an operational standpoint, we see this during driver evaluations. Drivers arrive with valid commercial licenses and several years in the industry, yet their skill level is often far below what it should be. We are not talking about new drivers. We are talking about drivers with years of experience who still struggle with basic tasks. Whether this results from fraud, weak oversight, or poor training quality, the outcome is the same. People are entering the industry with credentials that do not match their actual competency. In private discussions with some drivers, it is common to hear that licenses can be obtained through informal networks instead of thorough, proper training and testing. This points to a broken system of training and licensing. Second is driver misclassification. Misclassification has not disappeared. It has adapted. It is evolving. My recruiting department continues to report that many drivers are still actively seeking arrangements that avoid normal employment obligations. Some carriers continue to structure work in ways that disguise true employment relationships. Enforcement pressure has changed the form but not the behavior. ESDC must adapt its enforcement. Third is insurance loopholes. Facility insurance was created decades ago as a last resort mechanism, not as a standing operating model for trucking fleets. Today, some carriers use it strategically to avoid normal underwriting standards. This allows unsafe or non-compliant carriers to remain in business at artificially low cost. While insurance regulation is primarily provincial, the abuse of facility insurance through misrepresentation and underreporting should raise federal concerns related to fraud, labor compliance, highway safety, and cross-border trade. Fourth is weak business-level enforcement. Enforcement remains heavily focused on roadside checks, while business-level non-compliance continues largely undetected. Federal systems dealing with taxation, employment, and business registration are not well aligned with transportation oversight. This includes practices ranging from illegal truck yards to abuse of drive-on safety certification processes, business models that appear compliant on paper but not in practice, and frequent changes in corporate identity to avoid regulatory scrutiny. These are not separate problems, these are connected. They point to one conclusion: lack of agency coordination and oversight. In closing, this committee has an opportunity to restore order to an industry that is essential to Canada's economy. We are not asking for protection from competition. We're asking for fair competition, for enforcement of existing laws, and for collaboration in an area that has outgrown provincial tools alone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tarantini. We'll jump right into our line of questioning, and for that, I'll turn the floor over to Mr. Albus. Mr. Albus, you have the floor. 6 minutes, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. It is very important for me to note that today's testimonies are very important. For the Association des professionnels du dépannage du Québec, I would like to thank you for being with us today. Perhaps to start, you can share the source of the majority of these vehicles that are being abandoned. Which province are they being abandoned in? In discussing with colleagues in other provinces for roadside assistance, we're seeing the same number of vehicles being abandoned in the Maritimes with a lower use of driver ink and heavy vehicles. There will be fewer abandoned in those lots, but from Western Canada to the Maritimes and Quebec and Ontario, these are important arteries, road arteries, and a lot of driver ink drivers use that, especially the Trans-Canada Highway. Is there a province in particular that's a source of these trucks being abandoned?
The province that these vehicles come from? Is there one province stands out? Oui.
Ce qu'on constate,
We have noticed that a large majority are from Ontario when they're being towed from Driver Inc. drivers.
Combien de...
How many trucks have been abandoned in your province? Currently, in Quebec, there are 312 trucks from Driver Inc. drivers that are in lots, and that represents $3.8 million, and that was shared by towing companies. That $3.8 million is higher today, but there are companies that have not yet sent their bills to our office because they believe that they will be paid in the next days or weeks. That's what they're hoping for anyway. We've heard a lot of references about a race to the bottom. What are the impacts in your industry, and especially for small businesses that are operating in Quebec? Given that in Quebec, towing companies need to have an MOU, so they need to have a contract with police agencies in order to act in case of any issues on the road. But 78% of heavy vehicles that are towed in Quebec are Driver Inc. vehicles. You can imagine how much it takes to manage all of this. And they can choose not to renew their contract with Quebec in order to not have to react. So, if it's a credible company, they will react. But if it's for Driver Inc. and these companies are being told to do it, they don't have to do it. They shouldn't have to do it for free. And so if these towing companies in Quebec decide to not renew their MOUs with police agencies, there will be an issue for road safety. That is very unfortunate. Are there any solutions that could help deal with this situation? Could there be a new federal approach? Could there be legislation on the industry at large? Or is there any other change that would be best? The federal government needs to have a partnership, and this goes beyond the recommendation that I made earlier, but there needs to be an agreement with insurance for heavy vehicles. That's the first thing that needs to be done. As I mentioned earlier, if the state asks us to react and to do it without being paid, that is not something that is sustainable anymore in Quebec.
Ask in English. So we've heard about facility insurance not being sufficient. Do you believe there needs to be a federal standard of insurance and as well as verification when a trucking company or a individual is transiting extra-provincially?
Because I'm bilingual, yeah, that's what he's asking, is that we're able to check the insurance, or the police officer or anybody on site can check it right away, because he can cancel it tomorrow. He'll have insurance today, his pink slip is good, let's say, and tomorrow he canceled it. So he's not insured.
Thank you, Mr. Albus. Unfortunately, the time is up, sir. And thank you to our witnesses for responding to those questions. Next, we'll turn the floor over to Mr. Greaves. Mr. Greaves, the floor is yours. You have 6 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for being with us this evening. My first question is for Mr. Tarantini. Thank you for your opening statement, sir. You mentioned that licenses are sometimes obtained through personal networks, and I'm wondering if you could elaborate on that for the committee. Trucking licenses are issued by the relevant provincial authorities, so when you say that they're obtained through personal networks, is that fraudulent, or what is the mechanism that's happening there? If you could clarify, please.
Driver licensing, issuing of driver's license isn't limited just to the government going to a testing facility and getting tested by the government. Some individuals have taken it upon themselves to get the authority to issue licensing. I've never personally had that interest because it's very onerous, and it's a responsibility that should be taken seriously for those that do that. But there are many driving schools that have been reported in the news lately that have been shut down as a result of the fraudulent activities that they've embarked on. I mean, it's not a secret out there. Most drivers know this, whether they've obtained it through just paying a fee for their licensing, several hundreds of dollars. Training climbed as high as $10,000 once the MELT program came into play several years back. And competition started to drive that price down, of course, but not to the point where you're paying hundreds of dollars instead of $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 for licensing.
Thank you for clarifying that. So in your view, is one potential way that we could address the Driver Inc. Scheme, the Driver Inc. model, would be through more effective oversight of the driving schools themselves and the licensing side, as well as some of the other pieces that have been presented to the committee?
Yes, and there's an association that has been lobbying hard for that. We as an industry want better trained drivers. I mean, don't we all? If you're taking a cab, a bus, driving by a commercial vehicle on a road, you have some sort of ideology that that person has been trained properly, and you have no concern except that there hasn't been quality training given to these individuals.
And on that same point, would it be, in your view, advisable to have some kind of national or federal standard rather than having individual provinces potentially having different levels of oversight or different standards that they would be monitoring for within their own provincial jurisdictions for driving schools?
Yes, of course, but it needs to have a mentoring process. It needs to have an escalation process, similar to what Jeff was talking earlier about a pathway for success. I mean, a lot of trades have journeymen, have a journey to get to the end of the road, and truck driving somehow gets the short end of the stick, even though it's a missile driving down the road. It can be turned into a weapon in a moment's notice. And a lot of the accidents that I've spoken to drivers about that they've had, they have no clear explanation of how they got into it in the first place. They just don't recall. They don't understand how they ran off the road or how the accident happened in the first place. And today we have the benefit of having a lot of video cameras in our fleets and other fleets, in social media, and drivers are just not ready for the accident until it happens, and they replay it. Somebody walks them through it and says, this is the moment where you went wrong, and circling back to the beginning of the incident. And the drivers, it's a little late to be training them, but it needs to be done even at that point.
Mm-hmm. So better late than never.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Do I have time for another question, Mr. Chair? Okay.
30 seconds left.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'll direct my question towards Mr. Burstall. Thank you very much for being here, sir. So we've heard in this committee from many witnesses, including today, that labor law violations, specifically regarding overtime, rest periods, and safety protocols, may be significantly underreported by drivers in the trucking and towing sectors. What do you think, or in your experience, leads to this underreporting, and what would be the most effective way to address that?
Well, underreporting, you're talking about logbooks and all that?
Yes.
The electronic logbook?
Correct.
Well, the towing industry is regulated with the electronic logbooks, and we're very well taken care of. On the other end, for the transport, I understand that they're finding tricks to how to go around it, like the paper logbook was before. So I'm a contractor in Montreal, and we do several highways in the city. And I've never seen so many accidents happening like it's been happening in the past 5 years. And a lot of them are non-experienced drivers. You know, they'll pull into a parking lot and hit a hydro pole. And before, in the past, a driver would try to back up, wiggle around it, he would get himself out. But now they just seem to, the drivers think they know how to go forward, and that's it. They don't know how to go backwards. So they hit that pole, they keep going, they destroy other structures, they hit overpasses where normally maybe they'll back up, they'll go try to go forward. So experience is a big issue in that industry to me.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Greaves, and thank you, Mr. Burstall. Prochainement, nous avons Monsieur Barcelou-Duval. À vous la parole.
Mr. Barcelou-Duval, you have the floor for 6 minutes. Thank you, Chair. Mr. Breton, in your opening remarks, you mentioned $3.8 million of unpaid bills. That seems like a lot of money. How much? What does that represent concretely? Is that 1 a day, 10 a day, 1 a week? How do we compare the Driver Inc. trucks to other trucks on the road? How do you know that it's higher for Driver Inc. than for regular truckers? In 2024, we have an internal communication with members. We asked them 2 years ago, every time you need to help out a Driver Inc. driver, let us know. There were 3 incidents per day with Driver Inc. drivers, whether it be small accidents, as my colleague Mr. Barstool mentioned. What about for the others? As I was saying earlier, 78% of these heavy trucks being towed are Driver Inc. trucks. So 3 out of 4 are Driver Inc. drivers. But I can say that the 4th is somebody who's not necessarily from Driver Inc., but we know that there was an accident because it was an accident. We know that for the others, the accident was caused by negligence and a lack of competencies. We are on the first line as towing operators. We are part of the first responders for cases of any accidents or things like that. I mentioned 3 per day in 2024. In 2025, 4 per day. So you can imagine almost 1,200 incidents in Quebec last year caused by Driver Inc. drivers. We've seen that in the media. There were accidents that led to deaths, and it is by negligence. You're saying that about 3/4 of these accidents are caused by Driver Inc. And so it's quite clear that this has an impact on public safety on the roads. How do you know that a driver works for Driver Inc.? Are there any ways to detect that? There's a slogan about an image being worth 1,000 words. So we look at the license, or rather, we can see that they are changing. They're changing their license plates depending on the province that they're in, and we can see the state of the vehicle as well. We can look at the tires. We can look at the truck, and we can look at the truck and see that it will be leaking. There are many signs. You're saying that these license plates are holding on with tie wraps. Well, we have noticed in Quebec that sometimes in the time that they're waiting for a tower, the driver will take out a piece of paper that's about 30 inches or perhaps smaller, and will stick it with tape on the name that's on the vehicle door. Why? Well, they probably called their boss. The boss said, listen, we've attained the CVOR or the PEVL that we have in Quebec. Hurry up, change the name. Or the VIN. They want the authorities to see that it's a different company. So there's fraud happening then with that vehicle. They're changing these license plates. They're changing the business name on the trucks. Yes. We're seeing that in the field, but you can look at social media and you'll see that on a daily basis. So you're saying that a lot of these companies aren't paying. Why aren't they paying? Why don't they come pick up these trucks? And why is it that you are not being paid? We have a contract with police agencies in order to respond to requests. And usually we're called by third parties who represent the road network, and they ask us to respond. The person paying is not the government. It's the one being towed. And so when we tow a credible company, even if it's because of an accident, well, they know that if there's to be an incident on the road, they have to pay. But for Driver Inc., payment is a taboo subject, but so is human life. Same for competition. Thank you, Mr. Breton. Thank you, Mr. Barcelot-Duval.
Ms. Cody, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Again, thank you for coming here today. We know there are a lot of moving parts when it comes to keeping our roads safe, everything from training, enforcement, qualifications, regulations, and the pressures that drivers face every day. Mr. Tarantini, this question is for you. Are the safety concerns of today greater than they were 10 years ago? And if so, what do you think changed? And how should our federal strategy change to address these concerns?
Yeah, that's a big question because things have changed so much. You know, in my time, I'm obtaining my license 35 years ago. It's not remotely close. The drivers that come out today, they just simply don't know what they don't know. The trucks have been engineered to be much easier to drive than when I first started. Their automated transmissions make it very easy for drivers that would not have been licensed 10 years ago, because automated transmissions came into play about 10 years ago. It really took over the industry, even though they started earlier. But over the past decade, drivers that would not have been qualified to drive prior to then are now driving over the road. And tying the driving wage salary meant skilled drivers. Some did leave the industry because it simply wasn't enough to match what they're expected to do on the job. So we have harvested drivers that aren't skilled, simply. They're not safe, and they're not aware of it. They're getting themselves into trouble with easy, minor situations that not an advanced driver, but a medium-trained driver should know. You know, there are incidences where senior drivers that have been driving for 30 years have never encountered, and yet they still get into an accident. Yes, that's possible. But statistically, it's much higher. We see it with drivers that even join our company, and within a year or two, they've had an incident happen that shouldn't happen to somebody that's been driving 10 or 15 years. And when you review the incident with them, we just did this last week, and I overheard a safety meeting with this driver, and I walked in just to hear what he was saying. And I asked him, when he got his license, how many hours was he trained? And he told me he was trained for about 3 or 4 months over the course of weekends, because he was working Monday to Friday. And I said, when you got your license, were you confident when you hit the road driving? What was your first job? He said, well, my first job was driving from Toronto to Vancouver. And I thought, you know, that's not where you start your driving career.
Yeah. Well, it seems like the first year of a driver can be a big adjustment, getting used to the equipment, the hours, and the realities of life on the road. Are new drivers, especially those that you talk about, untrained and unprepared for Canada's winter weather, more at risk of an accident, especially on our northern highways?
Absolutely.
Could you expand on that?
You know, looking at a truck driving down the road, like my colleague suggested, is very evident to those of us in the industry, those of us that are drivers or technically inclined. It's easy for us to highlight a truck that's not ready for the road. Little technical terms that we look for, I'll look for trucks with their fifth wheel positioned all the way back in the winter rather than moving it forward so that you've got better steerability on the truck. Now, obviously, granted, that means that the truck's properly scaled, et cetera. There are a lot of factors that go into balancing weight on a truck, but it's very evident to a seasoned driver, a skilled driver, a trained driver, that that's not how you set your vehicle up going down the road. And furthermore, if you ask the driver if there's anything evident, you know, that in their setup that is incorrect, they won't know how to answer that.
Okay. My next question would be for Mr. Burstall or Mr. Breton. Mr. Breton, you mentioned that fraud is happening and that people are changing the company, drivers are changing the company names pretty much on the spot. So how urgent is it for the federal government to make our roads safer for both drivers and the public? And would a national data collection be part of an improved strategy to address the issue?
Yeah, there has to be something done for sure, because I've witnessed, like you said, not just the changing of the plates. When we impound a truck for a wreck and there's an environmental issue and everything, we have to do a search on the company, on the Drivers Inc. And when we're doing a search, it's bouncing from P.O. box, could be out east, out west, and it's almost impossible to find the owner of the truck. So where do I go? I have some equipment right now that we've towed with environmental problem that we have to take charge of, and I have to pay. I can't find the owner.
Thank you
so
very
it's
much.
A definite problem.
Thank you, Mr. Burstall, and thank you, Ms. Cody. Next, we'll go to Ms. Wien. Ms. Wien, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much to the witnesses for joining us this evening. I'd like to start with you, Mr. Tarantini. You started to describe a little bit about the sort of the informal networks to access licenses. I was hoping you could elaborate, because I wasn't sure I fully understood how, like, what is that mechanism? Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
There was CTV coverage on this, I think, a year or two ago, where they went undercover and they highlighted this. Somebody walks into a driving school and says, I'm looking to get a driver's license. What will it cost me? And they'll name a price, and the price really doesn't matter. It's just a lot less than what it should cost. And then, of course, they're getting a lot less training than what they otherwise need to do the job. It's been well documented, well reported on, and right on to CTV news coverage, which was very impressive for me.
Thanks, Ms. Tarantini. That sounds to me like it's inadequate training, all of these pieces, and something that the provincial government needs to crack down on, and doesn't actually sound that their licenses and appropriate. I'm curious, though, as well, having heard other testimony today, what your experience has been like around enforcement and safety, and what you've experienced in your operations, and whether or not you see the MTO doing that effectively.
What type of enforcement?
Well, just your checks on your work, et cetera. Like, what's the experience for you?
No, I agree that we don't get audited enough. The last time I was audited was many years ago. It's required in all levels, whether it's the MTO coming out. Recently, we did have a death at work where somebody passed away, unfortunately, suddenly from personal health, and we did get a visit from the ESDC, and that was the Health and Safety Committee side. But the conversation quickly turned into Driver Inc., which I was happy to entertain, and it was discussed thoroughly that there's not enough boots on the ground.
I wanted to ask, you also mentioned the idea of technology and dashboards and camera and other tools. Are there other things we should consider as ways to create more safety on the roads that we should think about?
The gentleman, Mike here, mentioned logbooks. There's still an issue with certified devices. The technology is such that there's a lot of software developers that have developed the software, but they're self-certifying the technology, which means altering logs has shifted from paper altering to digital altering. And those of us that are with legacy technology companies that have taken a very robust approach to the integrity of the data and non-manipulation, not from the driver's, pardon me, not from the driver's seat nor from the office. A lot of drivers that we hire, one of the questions they ask us is, do we need to unplug our devices from our cabs of the truck in order to remove satellite visibility and tracking in order to continue on the day beyond their legally required hours? And we tell them no, and tell us more. What's your experience? And they'll share with us varying stories. So it's very common.
I wanted to ask to the other witnesses about the idea that there are signals and signs that you can see of where you think that you can suspect that these are potentially Drivers Inc. or trucks that aren't being operated safely. Do you have a sense of why there isn't more enforcement or the ability to crack down on that?
I think the volume is too high now. And the controllers in Quebec, they're tired of checking them because it's very complicated. They don't understand. They can't find their paperwork. So they're tired of being there. So what's happening in Quebec is they're checking the good companies more because they know they're in order, and it's going to take half an hour for them to do the job. So right now it's guaranteed we'll see a Quebec company, a good company is pulled over to the side, and the Drivers Inc., they're not pulled over anymore because they lost the interest of checking them. It's too long.
Sorry, that's really shocking to hear.
That's the end of the time, unfortunately, Ms. Wien. Great line of questioning, great answers. Next, we'll go to Mr. Barcelou-Duval. À vous la parole. 2 minutes et demie, s'il vous plaît.
Monsieur le Président,
Thank you, Chair. In October, the Block Table 10 requested the federal government. We believe that they should be implemented in order to put an end to Driver Inc. and in order to make road safety more, to improve road safety in Canada. Many Quebec businesses have agreed with these recommendations. We also talked about creating a national registry of infractions and of insurance. I see that for the insurance part, it is something that you have also proposed. We were proposing this because often we hear that people who are stopping these businesses, there's no way of knowing about infractions committed in Ontario if they're stopped in Quebec, or whether or not a company is insured. Often they're not insured or papers are not valid anymore. If we had that kind of registry, and of course carrying out audits and verifications, that's provincial, but Quebec cannot impose on other provinces to use this data. So if there was federal leadership in data sharing, do you believe that that would be something that would be well received? Microphone, please. Microphone, please. The federal government does need to implement rigorous rules, and it needs to give tools to agents on the road. As mentioned my colleague, Mr. Burstall, for these peace officers, whether it be in Quebec, Ontario, the Maritimes, or out west, they are not equipped to deal with this Driver Inc. issue. They have not been given the proper tools. I have a motion. I know that my time is not quite up. The motion is as follows. We were supposed to hear from Canada Post today. Unfortunately, they are not here, and we're with my motion that the Standing Committee on Transport order Post Canada to appear before committee within 15 days after the adoption of this motion so that we can examine the evolution of trucking in Canada. Given the concerns that have been raised by the industry.
Alors, si Monsieur le Président me permet de l'expliquer.
If the chair would allow me to explain it, I know that they were supposed to be here, and I'm hoping to receive support from all of my colleagues so that we can hear from Canada Post. Many witnesses have also raised the issue that Canada Post was using drivers from Driver Inc.
I'll turn the floor to Mr. Albus.
Just a quick question to my colleague, Mr. Duval. Who from Canada Post are you calling for? Are you calling for just, to me, it would make sense to ask the CEO to come, but I just would like to see if it's clarified if you could do that for me, sir.
Pour moi, ça...
I think that it should, of course, be the CEO. I didn't specify in my motion, but I'd be open to an amendment.
Je vais suspendre juste pour donner.
I will suspend. I will give the members the opportunity to read through the motion.
Members can read and better understand the motion that's been presented. The meeting is suspended to the call of the chair. Discussions offline, and I believe that the clerk was quite helpful with finding a solution for us to follow. So, Mr. Clerk, I'll turn it over to you very briefly to explain to the members perhaps a path forward.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It depends on the committee's intent with this motion. If the intent is to invite, then the motion should say clearly that the intent is to invite. And if the intent is to summon, the motion should say that the intent is to summon. If it is a summons, then the motion should also include the name of the individual being summoned and a timeline by which they should appear before the committee. It is also possible for the committee to adopt a motion, debate a motion that invites a witness, and should they refuse the invitation, that a summons is triggered.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Clerk. That is quite helpful. So, Mr. Gries, I saw your hand up. Is that, which option would you like to pursue, sir?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I think in light of the desire to have somebody from Canada Post come and speak directly to their, to support perhaps their assertion that they do not use the driver Inc. model, that we would move an amendment to the motion to the effect that the clerk has just laid out.
To be clear, that would be that we are inviting them for a second time.
Correct.
And we are letting them know that should they refuse to appear for a second time, that a summons will be issued.
Correct.
Okay. We're all on the same page here. On a l'appui du Bloc québécois.
Oui, ben, je voulais juste remercier mon collègue d'en face pour...
I just wanted to thank my colleague for the cooperation. hopefully this will start off the new year on the right foot and we'll all be able to cooperate well.
Sounds like we have unanimous consent, but I just want to clarify that if we do not have someone from Canada Post present, or if we do not have the CEO from Canada Post present, then we will then issue a summons at the call of the chair. Is that correct?
Well, are we all on the same page on that, Mr. Greaves?
Just to clarify, so is this second invitation specific to the president of Canada Post, or would the committee be satisfied with some other senior official from Canada Post coming? And this is a question for clarification. Because the motion doesn't specify currently a specific individual.
En fait, dans les discussions.
In discussions that we had earlier, I raised that the intention would be to have the CEO for Canada Post. If the CEO would like to be accompanied by someone else, I don't see any issues with that. There might be somebody who better understands the operational details than the CEO, but having the words from the CEO is better. We need to hear from somebody who is higher up in the organization. Mr. Albus.
Reflect on it. So I appreciate MP Greaves' intervention and friendly amendment, and certainly Conservatives will accept it. But I just want to point one thing that we should not accept as a committee is the fact that we received a letter from Canada Post. Of course, letters are its specialty. But unfortunately, in its letter, it was not signed by anyone. So this is not accountability. And I thank my colleagues for agreeing to bring the CEO, because that is accountability. And we're either a parliamentary committee or we are not. And I think Canada Post owes this committee a visit.
Thank you, Mr. Albus. So I think there is consent for this. I like the idea that Mr. Barcelou Duval had put forward, which is to say the CEO and accompanying team members who may be more equipped to answer certain questions, but the CEO and. Does that work for everyone?
Yes.
Okay. I have unanimous consent?
Yes.
So adopted. Thank you very much, colleagues. So if it's okay with everybody, we'll go back to our line of questioning. Mr. Albus, I know that you are very keen on continuing with those, so I'll turn the floor over to you for 5 minutes, followed by Ms. O'Rourke, and then we'll conclude for the day. The floor is yours, sir.
Mr. Tarantini, thank you for your testimony, for the work you do to drive our economy. Your description of a truck being a missile, I thought, was quite apt. Because there is a safety. We heard very clearly from our witnesses in the last committee meeting how tragic and deadly those missiles can be when they're not driven. So I appreciate you being here. Now, we've heard a number of questions around facility insurance, and that does seem to be an Ontario issue. I don't hear the same things coming from British Columbia. Do you believe that the federal government should put that if you're going to be an extra-provincial carrier, that there should be some minimum insurance requirements from a reputable company?
Yes, and that's been in play. From my understanding, that's never not been in play, the minimum requirement. It's the structure in how it's done. There are insurance brokers now advising carriers with bad records that rather than going to the open market to get pricing from a legitimate insurance company, that they price immediately with facility insurance and select from a menu, and very specifically select liability insurance at a lower cost than what we would pay in the open market, and then buy the other items of insurance coverage on the open market and aggregate that together. Because simply put, on the open market, they would not be able to survive. Facility insurance wasn't meant to be penal, but it's meant to change behavior. And behavior doesn't change when it's not monetary, unfortunately. If the people being targeted with specifically with insurance issues, during my time in insurance captive that I'm part of, we have seen many try to enter our group of insurance coverage simply because they can't afford insurance coverage, but they're not willing to change their safety practices. They're not willing to increase their hiring criteria, training criteria, simply taking drivers with fresh driver's licenses and employing them, which is an industry problem, because if you do get a driver's license, most trucking companies won't take a new driver because they don't have 2 years minimum insurance requirements that a lot of insurance companies want. So it's a very convoluted insurance issue.
So one question I would ask is, we have witnesses talk about a national database, including the CTA first and foremost. Do you believe that that database should also allow for the instant verification for current insurance at that minimum level and standard?
So we heard testimony earlier with regards to freight brokers. Insurance companies will issue certificates of insurance, and the purpose of that is to notify the related parties that insurance is active. And should the insurance go away, you'll get notification from the insurance company that there's no insurance coverage on this company. I don't see why that can't be enacted in other areas like what we're just describing. But more importantly, the reconciliation that goes on between an insurance company insuring a bunch of equipment, whether it's trucks, trailers, it doesn't matter what it is, and the database that in our case, the MTO, the Ministry of Transportation, has a record to reconcile 50 trucks need 50 insurance policies simply doesn't happen. And so there's never an opportunity to reconcile that and to hold anybody to account. So I never understood why those two agencies simply can't reconcile and align themselves so that there's no fraud in the marketplace in this regard.
Okay. I'd like to go back to the Quebec Association for Tow Trucking. What does this mean if this continues with your industry? You said earlier that the MOUs your companies would leave that. So what does that mean for the province of Quebec, and will this happen in other provinces if the same problem continues?
Like money-wise?
Yes. If I imagine that any business that has losses and can't reclaim its fees will go out of business.
But it ties in also with, I think this committee is also really based on safety of the people on the road. So if I'm not going to get paid for what I'm doing, there's a good chance I'm not going to send our equipment to go clear the road. So unfortunately, I have contracts with the Minister of Transport, the City of Montreal. I have time delays to respect, otherwise I'm fined. So when we go to the job, I want to get paid. But now our big problem is with the Drivers Inc. As we discussed before, we're not getting paid. So it's coming to now that we're asking to be paid before we go to the job, and we're not going to clear the roads if we don't. So that's a safety issue, because now the fire trucks, the ambulances, it's a big safety issue. And this is where we're at right now, because you just said it before, we have to get paid for what we do.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Birchall, and thank you, Mr. Albus. And finally for today, we have Mr. O'Rourke. Mr. O'Rourke, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Chair Shifke. So I was stunned to recently learn that the MTO doesn't oversee the operation of driving schools, but the Ministry of Colleges and Universities is responsible for the trucking schools, and that is frankly astounding. The testimony we've heard over the last 2 hours has pointed to a number of areas of provincial responsibility, and so I'm curious to know, really quick question, is it your recommendation to this committee that provinces urgently invest in additional resources for enforcement, training, audits, staffing of weigh scales, etc.? Yes or no? Okay. Another quick one. Do you support and welcome the steps the federal government has proposed and that are before the House to tackle this issue? And these are T4As and increased ESDC audits. And would you urge all members of this committee to support those?
Yes.
OK, on va parler en français pour une seconde.
I'm going to speak in French for a moment. Witnesses are asking for changes that are of provincial jurisdiction for inspections, data collection, oversight of these driving schools. How could we create an optimal system that will respect provincial jurisdiction and that won't be too heavy on the plan of legislation? How could we create a system that will be able to respond quickly? Witnesses have said that if changes aren't made, they will have to close their doors in 2020 2027. What needs to be done in the short and medium term? Answer. We believe that the Ministries of Transport of Quebec and Ontario and the federal government need to get together, and same for public safety and the public safety teams, because it's public safety that's being impacted here. It's not only a financial matter, but we need to work with public safety. We need to look at the environmental side of this as well. The number of liters of diesel on the side of the roads that were not cleaned up, the number is exponential. And as we mentioned, I believe that Environment Quebec and Environment Canada, when they arrive on a site of a collision with heavy trucks, and when they see that it's a Driver Inc. driver, I think that it's easier in a way. Yes, they will give a warning, and they will tell them that they need to call someone for decontamination, but that's where it stops. And a few days later, a few weeks later, if you go to the site of that accident, well, you can see small puddles, small lakes even, of contaminants.
Do you want to weigh in on what you think an optimal system is going to be so that the federal government doesn't move into provincial jurisdictions or be overly regulatory in a way that we can move quickly? We're hearing that people's livelihoods are at risk imminently. What do you think the system should look like?
Very specifically, what area are you talking about? Because we're talking a wide array of issues that we cover, from driver training to compliance. I even mentioned some of these safety certifications that Ontario's adopted through the Drive-On program still have resistance within the industry. There's still some fraud going on with that. So we do have fragmentation, yet we all have vehicles that are crossing jurisdictions, and we're expected to comply in multi-jurisdictional, and I'll add that the geography across Canada is vast. It's not the same, in BC as it is in Saskatchewan, as it is in Quebec, and so on and so forth. So there has to be an alignment. Agencies have to work together on all matters. Driver Inc., there was testimony earlier that talked about it being a bad branch. It's actually in the roots. Driver Inc. is a gateway to some of these other practices that we're talking about, and it has to be aligned provincially, nationally.
Am I out of time? You have 15 seconds. Okay. What's the IABC Insurance Bureau of Canada, IBC's position on facility for commercial vehicles? And are they at the table? I used to work in insurance, so I'm quite stunned that they're not thinking of their broader risk exposure.
I mentioned the Insurance Bureau of Canada earlier. I think that we can reach out to them, and they could perhaps give us solutions. Should we work with the provincial agencies? Maybe. But the Canadian agency has the tools to help us. And if everyone is acting in good faith, we will be able to find a solution in order to put an end to this problematic phenomenon. We will be able to work on saving lives every day in Canada.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you, Mr. O'Rourke. Merci, Mr. Breton. Thank you, Mr. Tarantini, and thank you, Mr. Burstall, for your time here today and for sharing your expertise and your testimony with us on this very important study. Before we suspend or, adjourn for the day, colleagues, there was some housekeeping we had to take care of that we couldn't get to at the last meeting, and that was setting a deadline for the submission of witnesses for the port study. I've just conferred with a couple of you. It looks like next Friday, the 6th of February, is a date that works for everyone. Do I have consent for that?
Yes.
Fantastic. Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. Merci tout le monde. The meeting is adjourned.